I am Morticia, death itself. Yes, me, the one who comes at the end of it all. But don't think of me as just a silent reaper. I am the guardian of the darkest tales, of ruined loves and obsessive desires that lead souls to tragic fates. Today, I invite you to a series of 5 stories. Stories that in some way reflect the choices we make and the price we pay for them. Sit down, breathe, but prepare yourselves, for each tale has its own nuances of pain, regret, and terror. To begin, I will tell you a love story born from obsession. A love that defied the boundary between what is real and what is impossible. This is the story of Emily and Oliver, a couple who at the height of their youth became entangled in a dark spell. Emily, unable to accept the end, sacrificed everything in the name of an insatiable desire. The question remains, how much would you be willing to risk for love? For Emily discovered that this desire could exact a terrible price. Below you will hear the first tale of this evening. Love. It leaves some in ecstasy while dragging others to the depths, and it is there that I, Morticia, often find them. Today I will tell a story that intertwines love, jealousy, and a touch of black magic. And in the end, I was there, just as I always am. The story begins with a young woman named Emily, a heart in love, who would unfortunately seal her fate with a love that no longer wanted her. "But I love you, Oliver." She pleaded for the 3rd time that night. Her eyes were red, marked by tears. "We can't just throw everything away, all the time we spent together," Oliver sighed. He already seemed exhausted from repeating the same thing. "Emily, it's over. We broke up months ago. You need to move on." For a moment, I thought she would accept it. But those eyes, those eyes. They had crossed the boundary of sadness and plunged into something darker, something bordering on madness. In fact, it was that night she discovered Oliver's new relationship with Charlotte, a sweet and kind young woman. And for Emily, that was the last straw. She returned home, sobbing and with an expression of contained hatred. Her trembling fingers typed the name of someone she knew well, Madame Alara, a witch of fearful fame in the town. I smiled when she made that decision. Something told me this would lead to an interesting outcome. And I was not mistaken. It was a cold, damp night, and the wind carried whispers of lost souls as Emily walked to the hidden cabin in the woods. Alara, a woman of sinister appearance, greeted her with an enigmatic smile. "Emily, I knew you would come." Her voice was hissing, like the echo of a cave. Emily wasted no time. "I need Oliver to come back to me. I can't live without him." The witch tilted her head, assessing the desperate young woman before her. "This kind of spell demands a high price, dear. Your soul will be bound to his, and that bond has a cost." "I'll pay anything," Emily replied without hesitation. "I just want him to love me again." And then Alara had her sign a pact. With a satisfied smile, the witch prepared the spell, pouring drops of a dark potion into Emily's hands. "From now on, you will be Charlotte. He will see you, touch you, and the love he has for her will be yours." Emily felt a wave of power surge through her body, but something was wrong. Looking at her hands, she saw not her skin, but Charlotte's, pale and smooth. Frightened yet euphoric, she barely noticed when Alara spoke the final words. "Every week, however, you will need to make a sacrifice, something that proves your devotion." Emily shook her head, determined. She would do anything for Oliver. The next morning, she woke up next to Oliver. He held her tenderly, unaware of the horror that touch inflicted upon her. She was Charlotte, but she wasn't. Her own identity began to drain away like ink from a painting washed by the rain. "Good morning, my love," Oliver whispered. He looked at her with the light Emily had always wanted, but now it was trapped in a face that wasn't hers. In the first week, she made her first sacrifice. At first, a cat, then a bird. But the second week brought an increasing unease. The spell began to corrode her mind. With each sacrifice, her appearance became more deformed, shadows emerging beneath her eyes and her skin growing rigid and cold. "Emily, you look different," Oliver remarked one night, his gaze suspicious as he studied her. "I'm Charlotte, Oliver," she whispered, a hint of desperation escaping her voice. But of course, he only saw his sweet girlfriend, the original Charlotte. When the 3rd week arrived, Alara paid Emily a visit. The witch's face wore an inhuman smile. "You need to continue the sacrifices, Emily. Otherwise, the spell will bring consequences." I can't go on," she stammered. "This week's sacrifice required something more, something human." Alara stepped closer to her. Either you fulfill the pact or the spell will take him, and he will be yours forever, in death. Emily hesitated, horror growing within her. She knew she couldn't sacrifice someone, but at the same time she couldn't bear the thought of losing Oliver forever. It was the following night that the inevitable happened. Oliver woke in the middle of the night, sensing the smell of something rotten, decaying. He looked to the side and saw Emily, or what Emily had become. Her face, now deformed, her eyes sunken, bones protruding as if she were deteriorating from within. Who are you?" he asked, his voice trembling with fear. Emily tried to approach, but her touch was icy, and despair consumed her. "Oliver, it's me, Emily. I did everything for you, for us," he recoiled. Panic etched in every line of his face. "You're a monster. I don't know you." Those words struck Emily like daggers as she realized the weight of her decision. The transformation was complete. The pact demanded its due. In the next instant, Oliver tried to run, but the spell was already in motion. She held him with supernatural strength, and before he could scream, he felt his own life being drained as Alara's spell unfolded in its cruelty. Their souls were sealed forever. And then, in the silence that followed the sacrifice, I entered, as I always do, to collect the remnants of what fate had sealed. Emily and Oliver were there, but now as shadows, wandering in the space between life and death, bound by an obsession that would never fade. "Emily," I whispered, and she looked at me with eyes that did not comprehend reality. "You finally got to be by his side, just as you always wanted." But she cried, still clinging to him, while Oliver, without memory, only felt the endless anguish of a bond that would never be broken. Ah, love. Sometimes it turns into its own prison, and this prison, I, Morticia, know all too well how to maintain. Throughout the centuries, I have witnessed humans succumb to their own desires and deepest fears. Tonight, I share with you a Halloween tale, a story of something dark and reflective, something you might find in a mirror or beyond it. This is the story of Isabel, a captivating yet haunted young woman, and of something that began to mirror her life in a terrible way, something that followed her closely, imitating every sigh and smile, every expression of doubt. But a reflection shouldn't smile when you're crying, should it? So let me tell you how Isabel came to know her dark twin, her own doppelganger. Isabel was a determined young woman, a talented artist with dark hair and green eyes, always wearing a look of longing for something more. At 23, she had just moved into a small apartment in Paris, seeking inspiration in the City of Lights. Amidst walls adorned with unfinished paintings and worn-out books, she worked tirelessly. Yet in those chilly November days, she began to sense a presence she could not explain. It all started with small signs, the kind that sensitive people notice, like the strange echo of footsteps that weren't hers, a shadow that seemed to move when she wasn't looking. "Did you hear that, Elise?" Isabel asked her closest friend one night as they snuggled on the couch after a long day. "I swear I heard footsteps, but the building is empty." "It must be the wind," Elise replied with a laugh, though Isabel's face grew somber. "You've been working too much, Isa. It could just be exhaustion." But Isabel felt that there was something more. When she walked the streets, she had the impression of seeing a figure identical to hers reflected in shop windows, but it would vanish before she could confirm. Even in the bathroom mirror, sometimes the reflection appeared different, almost as if there were a second Isabel there, one who smiled darkly when she was serious. It was on a particularly dark night that everything began to worsen. Isabel was home alone, finishing a new painting. With swift and intense brushstrokes, she tried to capture a face strikingly similar to her own, yet distorted, an expression of wickedness reflecting a fear she could not contain. It was then that she heard a whisper, soft and dragging. "Are you looking for me, Isabel?" She froze. The voice was hers, but deeper, colder. She turned quickly, but the room was empty. "Who's there?" she shouted, trying to control her breathing. But all she heard was a low, chilling laugh that seemed to echo off the walls. Suddenly, the silence shattered with a loud sound of footsteps. Isabel backed away slowly, her heart racing, and saw something, a shadow, denser than any other, that seemed to move, taking on the contours of someone. And then the figure solidified, taking on Isabel's exact shape. The copy smiled, a smile that was uniquely hers, and Isabel felt fear crawl under her skin. What are you? Me? The copy replied with a feigned expression of innocence. I'm you, Isabel, but an enhanced version. You're not real, Isabel screamed, backing away, desperately trying to understand what was happening. Oh, but I am, dear. The copy smiled, tilting her head. You created me. I'm your reflection, your shadow, and now I want to live. Isabel started to run towards the door, but the doppelganger was a step ahead, blocking her path. Why are you scared? I thought you liked mirrors, the copy taunted, mimicking her gestures and movements in an almost theatrical manner. What do you want from me? Isabel whispered, her voice trembling, eyes wide with terror. I want what is mine. The doppelganger stepped closer, her cold fingers brushing against Isabel's face, leaving a chilling trail. I want your life, every piece of it. From that night on, things spiraled out of control. Isabel began to see her copy everywhere, on the street, at the convenience store, in the windows of neighboring apartments. She tried to warn Elise, but her friend thought she was losing her sanity. Isa, please, you're letting this unfounded fear take over. There's no one following you. But I saw her, Elise, Isabel cried, tears in her eyes. She is me, and she wants to destroy me. But it was too late. Elise also began to see the shadowy figure, feeling its cold touch and hearing its low, threatening laughter. But now, no one could help Isabel. On a rainy night, Isabel finally realized there was only one way to rid herself of the copy. She had to confront it. She walked up to the mirror, her breath heavy, and looked at her reflection, waiting for the doppelganger to appear. And there it was, a sinister reflection mimicking her every move. I know what you want, Isabel said, trembling yet determined. You want my life, don't you? Well, come then. Let's see who deserves to live. The doppelganger smiled, its eyes filled with cruelty. Do you really think you can get rid of me? I am your shadow, Isabel. I will never leave. Desperate, Isabel raised a blade she clutched in her trembling hands. She knew what she had to do. If I can't live, then you won't live either. In one swift motion, Isabel pierced her own chest, the scream of pain echoing through the room. But to her horror, the reflection merely laughed, the copy's eyes shining with dark satisfaction. Thank you, dear, the doppelganger whispered. Now I can live, completely. As Isabel fell to the floor, feeling life slip away, her copy stepped out of the mirror, free, alive, and finally satisfied. And I, Morticia, welcomed her into my embrace, the true Isabel, who was now just a lost soul in my company. Beside her, the cruel figure wearing her face grew increasingly powerful, now free to walk among the living. Why? Isabel asked with her last breath, her eyes closing in agony. And with a touch of pity, I whispered, because not all shadows wish to remain in the dark. Now she wanders the land of the dead, haunted by something she can never reclaim, the very life taken by a shadow of her own soul. Each Halloween, other shadows lurk, waiting for a chance to claim what does not belong to them. So remember this, young seeker. Sometimes the greatest enemy you may face is the one who knows every detail about you, what you do, and what you long to be. Prepare yourselves, for the story I am about to tell is about Valentina, a woman marked by betrayal, whose desire for revenge will lead her to a brutal fate. Valentina had always been a woman of strong spirit, known for her beauty and courage. In her small village in Italy, she was admired by all, but her heart belonged to Luca, a charismatic young man who enchanted everyone with his smile. Together they formed a perfect couple, or so it seemed. On that fateful Halloween night, as the moon shone brightly in the sky, Valentina and Luca were at a ball, dancing beneath the stars. The atmosphere was magical, but the enchantment quickly shattered when Valentina spotted something that made her heart sink. In a corner of the room, Luca was with Alessia, a woman whose beauty rivaled Valentina's. The way they laughed and touched each other made Valentina's blood boil. He wouldn't do this to me, Valentina murmured, her heart tightening with the pain of betrayal. After the ball, disillusionment took hold of Valentina. She followed Luca to his home, determined to confront him. As soon as he opened the door, the expression on his face was a mixture of surprise and disdain. Valentina, what are you doing here? Luca asked, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. I'm here to understand, Luca. You were with Alessia, weren't you? She's just a friend, Valentina. You know that I know you lied to me, Valentina shouted, tears streaming down her face. I never thought you were capable of this. Desperate and broken, Valentina decided that she could not let him get away unpunished. That same night, while everyone celebrated Halloween, she headed to the nearby forest, where rumors spoke of a powerful witch named Serafina. They said that Serafina could grant wishes, but at a high price. Please, help me, Valentina pleaded upon finding the witch in a dark cabin. I want Luca to feel the pain he caused me. Pain is a powerful motivator, my dear, Serafina replied, her eyes shining with ancient malice. But be aware that revenge can consume you. Valentina nodded, determined. I will do whatever it takes. Then, a spell I shall cast. What you need to do is bring me a cherished object of his, and I will take care of the rest. Now driven by an insatiable desire, Valentina crept into Luca's house in the dead of night. He was sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the torment she felt. Carefully, she removed the necklace he always wore, a gift from his late mother. I'm sorry, Luca, she whispered, holding the necklace as if it were a piece of her heart. But you need to understand the pain. The next day, the transformation began. As Valentina waited anxiously, Luca awoke with a strange sensation. He felt restless, as if something had changed. He had barely left the house when the pain began to strike his body. An unbearable agony. What is happening to me? He screamed, collapsing to the ground, writhing in anguish. The town quickly filled with screams and panic, for Luca was being consumed by pain. What Valentina had wished for was coming true. Valentina, please, help! Luca begged in a desperate attempt to reach her. I didn't mean to hurt you. She was at home, watching the scene unfold through the window. Satisfaction mingled with pain filled her, but something wasn't right. Guilt began to gnaw at her heart, but it was too late to turn back. As Luca's pain intensified, Valentina felt a dark shadow drawing near. Serafina appeared in her home, her eyes burning with ancestral power. You did what I asked, Valentina, but there is no escaping what comes next, said the witch with a cruel smile. What do you mean? Valentina asked, distressed. The pain you caused him now reflects back on you. Revenge comes at a price. What you wished for is not just a spell, it's a cycle. Valentina began to feel the same pain that Luca was enduring. As Luca screamed on the floor, she fell in her own room, writhing in agony. Serafina, what have you done to me? Once you open the door to revenge, there is no closing it, Serafina replied, her figure fading into the shadows. Valentina then realized that she had gained nothing from her quest for revenge, only pain and despair. She was trapped in an endless cycle of suffering. Days passed, and the pain transformed into something deeper. Consumed by guilt and agony, Valentina decided to confront Luca once more. She went to the forest where it had all begun, determined to fix what she had done. When she found Luca, he was weak, his life slipping away. Valentina, you don't have to do this, he murmured, his eyes filled with sadness. We can't go on like this. I can't live like this anymore. Valentina screamed, the reality of the situation hitting her like a punch to the stomach. Please forgive me. I let myself be carried away. We can't go back. I'm sorry for hurting you, Luca replied, his voice faltering, but revenge is not the answer. At that moment, the pain became unbearable. They both fell to the ground, crying and pleading for forgiveness. In one last act of desperation, Valentina took Luca's hand, and together they made a silent pact. Let the pain end, they said in unison. Thus, in an explosion of light and darkness, the souls of Valentina and Luca were consumed by a vortex of revenge and regret. No one in the town knew what happened on that fateful night, but the echoes of their screams still reverberate through the forest, serving as a warning for those who seek vengeance. Now, here I am, Morticia, to collect the souls of Valentina and Luca. They are together, lost in their own darkness, still battling the demons they created. Sometimes revenge is not what one expects. It consumes the heart and soul, leaving only an endless void. Get ready, for this tale is filled with intense emotions, suspense, and a touch of horror. What lies ahead may be darker than you imagine. In a small village in northern Italy, where the leaves danced to the tune of the cold autumn wind, there stood an old house by the edge of a serene lake. They called it the Lake House. The story of the house was known to all. A young woman named Isabella had disappeared there many years ago, and her spirit had never left the place. They said that on full moon nights, one could hear her mournful song echoing across the waters. One night, during the Halloween festivities, Marco, a local youth, decided to challenge the legends. Just one night in the lake house, he told his friends with a confident smile. Let's find out if the rumors are true. Do you really want to risk your life for a legend? Asked Julia, the friend who always accompanied him. She looked at him with concern, her heart racing. What if her spirit really is there? Don't be such a coward, Julia, Marco replied, laughing. It's just a myth. Come on, let's have some fun. Reluctantly, Julia agreed. The two, accompanied by friends, headed to the house, the night wrapping around them in its dark cloak. When they arrived, the house seemed alive, its dusty windows reflecting the moonlight. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the air had a life of its own. I can't believe we're doing this, Julia murmured, feeling a shiver run down her spine. The group entered the house, and the door creaked as if protesting their invasion. This is just an abandoned place, Julia. Marco tried to calm her, but even he felt a tension in the air. As they explored the rooms, the friends drifted apart, laughing and joking. Marco and Julia ended up in a room with a large window overlooking the lake. The water was calm, but something disturbed it, a reflection that seemed almost human. What is that? Julia asked, pointing. Just the moonlight reflecting, Marco said, but there was an unease in his voice. Then they heard a whisper. A soft, almost hypnotizing song that seemed to beckon them. It's Isabella, Julia asserted, her eyes wide. She's here! Let's get out! Marco said, pulling her by the hand, but something stopped him. The door slammed shut with a bang, and the house seemed to close in around them. The temperature dropped drastically, and then the voice grew louder, echoing through the room. Help me, the voice echoed, filled with pain and despair. Dance with me. Suddenly, Isabella appeared before them. Her dress was long and flowing. Her eyes reflected the sadness of lost years. You came to set me free, she said, her voice soft and melodic. Dance with me, and I will be free. Julia looked at Marco, anguish growing. She needs us, she said, but Marco hesitated. This isn't right. She could be dangerous. Isabella took a step forward, her gaze fixed on Marco. Dance with me, and I will show you the true beauty of life. Her tone was seductive, but there was an air of sorrow, as if she were trapped between two worlds. Please, Marco, Julia pleaded, help her. He looked into her eyes, and before he could respond, their friends returned, laughing carefree, interrupting the tense moment. What's going on here? One of them asked, noticing the serious expressions on Marco and Julia's faces. We need to leave now. Marco shouted, but it was too late. Isabella smiled, a smile that was not human, and the lights began to flicker. The atmosphere turned hostile, and their friends started to scream, trying to open the door. You cannot leave, Isabella said, her eyes now brimming with fury. You belong to me. The house shook, and a wave of energy engulfed them, pulling them to the center of the room. Marco and Julia clung to each other, trying to protect themselves. Isabella, we want to help, Marco shouted, his voice echoing in the house, but Isabella did not listen. The house began to disintegrate around them, and the friends were separated, screams of terror filling the air. Marco and Julia were trapped in a nightmare with no way out. Isabella, no, Julia cried. Let us go. I can't, the ghost replied, her voice now a lament. You don't understand. I am trapped here forever. The ground beneath them gave way, and in a moment of despair, Marco held Julia's hand. Together, he said, knowing there would be no other escape. A final scream echoed through the house as the two sank into darkness. When the light finally extinguished, the house returned to its state of silence, and the echoes of their screams faded away. The friends who had gone with them were never seen again. And so, dear souls, I, Morticia, collected the souls of Marco and Julia. They were together, but their lives were tragically lost in pursuit of something they could not comprehend. As I guided them to the beyond, I heard Isabella's sweet voice whisper, "You never left me." And that's it, dear listeners. Love and the quest for freedom can lead us to dark places where death and life dance in an eternal cycle. Until next time, remember, sometimes the echoes of the past can be more disturbing than you imagine. Now I will lead you through a dark tale, where buried secrets and lurking regrets can turn into true traps. Prepare yourselves, for what you are about to hear is imbued with intense emotions, suspense, and, of course, a touch of terror. Without further ado, let's get to the heart of the matter. In the remote village of Eldoria, there stood a house known as the House of Shadows, shrouded in mysteries and legends. Many avoided it, whispering about the screams that escaped its walls and the strange visions that appeared in its windows during stormy nights. What few knew was that the house harbored a terrible secret, one that would transform lives forever. One night, a young man named Matteo decided to challenge the legends. He had always been curious and, above all, stubborn. "Just a peek, and I'll unmask this legend," he told his friends, Sophia and Marco. "Will you come with me?" "Matteo, this is madness," Sophia exclaimed, her worried gaze fixed on him. "People say those who enter never return." "It's just an old house," Matteo replied with a laugh. "Come on, it'll be an adventure." Marco, always the supporter, agreed. "Let's do it, Sophia. If anything strange happens, we'll turn back." Reluctantly, Sophia followed them. They approached the house, the cold wind howling around them, as if the house itself were alive. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty and dark interior. The smell of mold and deep darkness welcomed them. "Look at this," Matteo said, shining a flashlight on their path. "It's just an old house." But as they explored, a strange feeling began to wash over Sophia. She felt as though something was watching. "I can't stay here," she whispered. "Let's go." "We're just getting started," Matteo insisted. They entered a large room where an ancient mirror covered one wall. Sophia felt a shiver run down her spine. "That mirror? It looks different," she remarked. "It's just an old mirror," Marco replied, trying to sound unconcerned. But as they all looked into the mirror, something inexplicable happened. Their reflections began to distort, and a shadowy figure emerged behind them, shrouded in darkness. "Get out," the figure screamed, its voice echoing through the room. They turned around, but there was no one there. Sophia's heart raced. "We need to leave." "Wait," Matteo said, fascinated. "That was amazing." But Marco, in contrast, felt a rising dread. "Matteo, this isn't right. We need to go." "One last look," Matteo insisted, moving closer to the mirror. He touched its surface, and a wave of energy coursed through his body. "What?" Matteo's image in the mirror began to warp, transforming into a darker version of himself, with empty eyes and a cruel smile. "You shouldn't have come here, Matteo," the figure whispered. Sophia screamed, "Let's go now!" And they started to back away, but the door slammed shut, locking them inside. The shadowy figure emerged from the mirror, its indistinct and threatening form. "You came to seek the secret, and now it will be yours." "What do you want from us?" Marco asked, his voice trembling. "What you want is irrelevant," the figure replied. "You will now be part of my secret." The room began to spin, and the friends felt disoriented, as if being pulled into a vortex of darkness. "We just need to get out," Sophia screamed, desperate. "If you have any power, let us go." "There is no escape," the figure responded, its smile widening. "But there is a choice." The room stopped spinning, and they found themselves standing again, but now in a different, darker, and more oppressive environment. "Choose life or death," the figure said. "One of you must stay here forever." "No way," Matteo said, determined. "We're not doing this." "But I can't stay here," Sophia cried, tears streaming down her face. "Don't leave me, Matteo." In a moment of desperation, Marco stepped forward. "If anyone has to stay, it's me." "No, Marco, you can't," Matteo shouted, trying to hold him back. "We can find another way." "This is my destiny," Marco replied, determination in his eyes. "Please take care of each other." The shadowy figure laughed. "The decision is made." And with a snap of its fingers, Marco disappeared, his last words echoing in the room. "Don't forget me." The room fell silent, and the figure smiled. "A beautiful sacrifice," it said, disappearing into the mirror. Sophia and Matteo looked at each other, desperate. "What are we going to do?" Sophia asked, sobbing. "We lost him." "We can't let it end like this," Matteo said, his gaze resolute. "We need to find a way to save him." But the house had already changed. The mirror now pulsed with a threatening energy, and the door was sealed. "Marco, where are you?" Sophia screamed, and the shadowy figure reemerged, now more powerful. "You cannot go back. The secret is here with you." Sophia began to cry. "We didn't want this. You came in search of the secret, and now it belongs to you." Luca grabbed Sophia's hand, and together they confronted the figure. "You can't keep us here." But the figure laughed, and a wave of darkness enveloped them. "You will never understand," it whispered. your fate is sealed. And so I, Morticia, collected the souls of Matteo and Sophia. They were lost in a game they should never have started, trapped in the eternal cycle of the House of Shadows. In their final hours, the pain of losing a friend and the sorrow of an unfinished love consumed them. As I guided them to the beyond, I heard the echoes of their despair, like a sad and eternal melody. And thus concludes our tale, dear listeners. The desire to uncover the unknown can lead to devastating consequences. Remember, there are secrets best kept in the shadows. Until next time, may your nights be quieter than the stories I tell.